This is my sci-fi FPS, and I've been working on it for about 2 years. There's some cool guns, enemies, and a game loop, but somehow in these last 2 years, I haven't made a single playable level. I mean, the best I've managed to do is create empty test scenes, and for the keen eye of you, when I say test scene, I mean a single cube. So I think it's time we change that. Welcome to Devlog 13. Now, before we make some super cool levels together, we need to fix the general look of the game. If we take the game back half a year ago, it looked a little bit like this. Sure, it was simple and basic, but universally speaking, everyone liked it, myself included. Then, one day, for absolutely no reason, I decided to spend a whole month of my life completely recreating the look of the game. And universally speaking, nobody liked it. People were complaining about how flat and colorless and unsaturated the game looked. And looking back, I completely agree with all of you. For some reason, I had this idea that making things look brighter made them look better. So I basically ramped up all the brightness settings on the post-processing, lighting, and skybox, and it just completely cooked the game. So I decided to fix all those visual issues, and would you look at that? After tweaking the post-processing for almost half an hour, I'd say the visuals are definitely looking a lot better than before. I also can't really put my finger on it, but something about the new visuals remind me of Minecraft shaders. Regardless, after giving the game a small graphical update, I moved on to creating the first actual level. The final version of the game is going to have many different types of levels, but in this video, we'll start off with the first type, story missions. This video game is going to be a story-based single player, and so these story missions are going to be where the player fights bosses and are going to be the big levels in the game. Although I haven't really thought much about the story, I do want it to revolve around the concept of rogue AI, and for that reason I want these levels to have a sci-fi style similar to something like Tron. So I made a quick blockout with individual rooms and temporary props. I hate linear levels where the path is too linear, like a hallway, so I consciously added rooms with layers and multiple paths, as well as hidden areas that the player can explore. Once I'd finished the blockout, me, being the absolute noob that I am, made the very educated decision to skip everything important like diversifying gameplay, optimizations, enemies, and decided to take a look at graphics. Now, in my mind, this area was bound to have a darker theme, considering that the dark undertone is what makes Tron and these Google images look so good. Also found out that reflections look exponentially better in dark scenes. So I created two variations of my grid texture, placing the darker material on the wall and the brighter one on the floor. Now this looks cool, but it's missing something. My references from Tron and Google make it pretty clear that the distinguishing visual feature for this style is rim lights, so I placed these blue highlights around the entire map. There's still one problem though. This style revolves around the floor being bright and the walls being dark, but this isn't always possible. For example, in this elevated region here, the side needs to be dark and the top needs to be white. But how can I use two materials on the same object? I made this really cool shader that automatically makes vertical faces dark and horizontal faces bright. So all I need to do is select all the world geometry and replace the material with this new shader. And I don't know about you, but this really feels like magic. Now I'd say that the level itself is looking pretty good, but that draws attention to how bad the skybox is. The skybox is so bright that looking at it literally hurts my eyes. So I decided to completely change it, lowering the emission and changing the clouds. And to be honest, I'm in love with this new skybox. It's not too bright, and I feel like it fits the game a lot better than the old one. Oh man, that's a lot of stuff, so let's take a little break to enjoy it all. With a basic art style for the level, we now need to fill it with actual gameplay. So I started by focusing on interactions. These cubes that you can see around the map were temporary crates, so I replaced them with an updated version. I wanted them to fit the new art style, but I couldn't replicate the style without the crates looking ugly. So I looked for inspiration from other games. Now, I didn't really intend for this to happen, but I pretty much just stole the crates from Arcadian Rift, which was another sci-fi FPS that's now been cancelled. For this reason, the crates will probably receive some kind of visual change in the future. But for now, I'd say I'm pretty happy with them. I also gave the player the ability to shoot open crates with guns, which added some nice little immersion. At this point, I was thinking of other ways the player could interact with the environment, when I came up with the idea of being able to grab objects. I've seen many games use this method to manipulate the environment, and I've always thought it's pretty sick. So I added the ability to grab, drop, and throw objects, and even though there are still some kinks that need to be worked out, this feature now opens up a world of possibilities. For example, I didn't even intend for this, but this mechanic allows for new ways to move around the environment and allows the player to use the environment around them during combat. As a basic set of interactions, let's add one more thing. The weird problem with linear levels is that if not done properly, the player can just run through the level without actually fighting enemies, exploring, or doing anything else. To stop this, some kind of door system is commonly used. I started by creating an unlocked version of the doors, which you can just walk right through. Then I made a locked version of the door by making a grid of cubes and adding highlights similar to the crates. In order to open them, I made a quick animation and then added a particle system. But now we need a way to actually power the doors. I started by making a power orb with a Fresnel and distortion shader. I then set up a system so that you could shoot the orb onto some kind of power receiver, which would then power up the doors. I also added the ability for doors to require more than one power orb for more complex runes. With that in place, I added the art, a line to help navigate the player, and replaced the temporary doors with these new ones. With everything in place, it's time we add the enemies. In the last video, I made a lineup of enemies for the game, and even though they need a lot of improvement, I'll be using them for now. I created a trigger system that spawns enemies once the player enters certain areas, and set it up around the entire level. As a finishing touch, I gave the boarding pod a little bit of love by updating the model and adding these cool thruster effects. I also set up a soft respawn system so that you don't continually fall into the abyss. So with that out of the way, I'd say that I've nailed this specific level. From here on out, a lot of the remaining work is probably going to revolve around scaling these levels and creating more content for the game. My next focus is going to be on making a demo for all of you to play. It might take a while though, since I'm going on vacation for 2 weeks, but as soon as I get back, I'm going to try and get this game into your hands as quickly as possible. With that said, I'll see you in the next one.